Hey there, Colin Gwynn here with 3D Robotics. In this video, we're gonna do our first flight with the Iris Plus. So we've taken it out of the box, we've charged the battery, we've screwed on our propellers, now it's time to go fly. So one note is that you may or may not wanna have your gimbal and your long legs on for your first several flights. If you're just learning how to fly for the first time, I'd suggest keeping the shorter legs on, having no camera gimbal, and just get used to flying around before you put the gimbal and the long legs on. Other than that, let's go out and find an open area and do the first flight. So the first thing we want to do is find a nice wide open area to do your first few flights in. That'll, one, allow us to make sure there's no obstructions in the way for us to run into. Secondly, it'll give us a nice open sky so that we have a good satellite reception. That just allows GPS guidance to keep the copter in the same place for you, which will make your first few flights much easier. So now that we're out here in a nice open area, I'm gonna step forward about 10 or 15 feet from where I wanna stand when I'm flying, set the Iris down. I'm gonna turn on the controller. Go ahead and make sure all your switches are up or away from you. So just common practice, we'll have that on. We're gonna go ahead and put in our battery, plug it in. We'll give it a second to initialize the sensors and the accelerometers, close the battery door. Now, the last thing we're gonna do before we take off is we're gonna give it a little bit of time to get a nice, good GPS signal before we take off. You'll see a flashing green light when it has a 3D lock. And now that I have that, I'm ready to take off. So in order to take off, you have to arm the copter. The last little on-copter fail-safe we have is this little button on top. In no way will it ever allow the propellers to spin until you hold this button down. You'll hear a tone and it'll turn solid red. That's how you know that the motors could spin up when you tell it to. So I'm gonna go ahead and hold it down. We hear a little tone, we have a solid red light. That means the motors are ready to start spinning. So I'll go ahead and step back to where I'm gonna fly from. You wanna make sure to keep the Iris facing away from you, so you're looking at the back of it, you're looking at that blinking LED light. That means that when I say go left, it's gonna go to my left. When I say go right, it's gonna go to my right. It'll make your first few flights much easier. You can adjust the rotation of the copter with this left stick. You can also adjust the altitude with the left stick. So going up above middle stick will cause it to go up, below middle stick will cause it to come down. The right stick is to go forward, back, left, and right. So to take off, we're gonna first switch into loiter mode, which is actually the middle position on your flight mode switch. Loiter mode just means that we're gonna use GPS guidance to help keep the copter in the same place and fight the wind and things like that. Again, just making your first few flights a lot easier. Now that we're in loiter mode, we're gonna hold the left stick down and to the right for a few seconds till we hear a tone. Once we hear that tone, we know that it's spooling up. And now that the motors are spooled up, we're gonna push it up over 50%, let it come up off the ground, go back down to 50% when you're ready for it to maintain its altitude. So I've got it here, maintaining its altitude. Now we can experiment with just nice, really, really fine adjustments to the right stick here to move to the right. Now we can move back to the left. Never flying it too far away and always keeping it in front of you to make orientation a lot easier. You can also go forward. Then you can come backwards. Again, come back, but don't go back so far that it comes over your head. You want to keep it out in front of you. Now your left stick rotates it to the left, rotates it to the right, and if you push up on it, it increases the altitude. You go down below the middle of the stick, and it decreases the altitude. I'm gonna put it back in the middle, and it'll sit right there for us, using satellites to maintain its position. So when you're ready to land, you can either reduce the throttle down below middle stick until it comes down and lands itself, or a really cool feature with this top left switch that says channel 7, you can flip it down and that puts it into land mode. So wherever you are, it'll just maintain its current position if it has a GPS signal. If it doesn't have GPS signal, it just flattens itself and comes down and lands. So I'm just gonna flip this switch here and let the Iris do all the work. So really nice, it's coming down for a perfect landing. I'm not having to do anything. Now, once it's on the ground, the motors go into an idle, and I take that left stick that I used to arm it, and I go to the bottom left, and it immediately turns off the motors. So now we'll walk up to the Iris. We're gonna hold down that top button again to disarm the motors. You'll see it flashing. Then we simply unplug the battery, turn off your controller, and now you're an Iris pilot.